Hi, welcome to Switching Mindsets. This is Anuradha Verma, and today I'm speaking to Arundhuti Dasgupta Singhal. She's a journalist and co-founder of the Mythology Project and also teaches myth and folklore online as well as offline. Hi, Arundhati.
Hi, Anuradha. Happy to be here with you.
Yeah, great to have you here. So, before we start talking about Sita, that is, how we see her over the years, and how we want to see her as a strong woman and not a victim, as I think most feminist retellings have, tried to do right by her, right? So, before we get into that, could you tell me about the Mythology Project? What prompted you to set it up, and also what you teach?
Hi. So I set up the Mythology Project with a friend of mine almost a decade ago. And our aim was to build an archive of ancient stories, myth, folklore, legends, etc. And in that space, when we work in that space, we realize that there is no, you have to do it as a comparative framework because myth and folklore and legend across the world, across ancient civilizations, has, it runs along it kind of creates its own footprint. And if you're not able to see that footprint, you don't really understand these stories because these stories carry a wealth of information. Apart from being stories, they tell you who are telling these stories, what were the kind of people they were, what were their fears, what were their desires, what was the things that were keeping them up at night, what were the questions that they were plagued with. So we started looking at it. I did a course in comparative mythology from the Bombay University, and that is what I kind of got me into it. And as we built the archive, we discovered that there is a ton of knowledge that exists in these stories that is just, too much to let it just go without being able to bring it out. So that's what we've been doing. We've been writing, we've been teaching. We teach at a couple of colleges in Bombay, and also offline, I mean online, we teach online, and we have courses. We run a few courses that we do it individually under the platform of the Mythology Project. So we that's how we kind of want to spread the word that there is a lot of information that is there in these stories, and in some sense it is our common intangible heritage. Why should we lose it? Why should we let it just go, just fall apart? So that was the idea of the Mythology Project.
Absolutely, because we are so entranced by it even today. I mean, it's been centuries. We are still, children are being told, we were told, you're reading
Yeah.
about it everywhere. It's fascinating. And what you just pointed out, it also reflects the times that, the different tellings of the
Yeah.
Ramayana. It also reflects the times and the people and what their
Yeah, absolutely.
occupations were at that time. So,
Absolutely.
yeah, absolutely. So there are many versions of the Ramayana, or like I was reading AK Ramanujan's
Hmm.
paper, and he said that he doesn't want to call it versions, he wants to call it tellings, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
even Valmiki did a do-over, right?
Yeah.
Maybe do-over
Yeah.
is the wrong word, but he tried to do
Uh,
justice by Sita,
yeah.
right? Do you want to start
Yeah.
with that? The Adbhut Ramayana, I think, right? It's called.
Okay, so let me start with
Yeah,
the idea of the Ramayana.
right,
So
right. Let's start with that.
Yeah. So Ramayana, we know it as a, you and I in our current planes, we look at it as a text. It's a linear story about a hero king who goes on this, basic adventure, who's exiled, and he kills the demon king, and he comes back and rules this, great kingdom. In a nutshell, this is the story. However, this story has had so many people just taking it and adopting it that it's kind of got a life of its own. So we have stories that tell you why there are many Ramayana. So there is a story about Hanuman, for example. Right towards the Ramayana, one of the Ramayans is coming to an end, and Ram is meeting with this. He's meeting with this August. He's in August company. Basically, he's got two sages who are sitting and conversing with him. And in the meanwhile, just I'm cutting it very short. But what happens is his ring, Ram's ring, falls down, and because it's Ram's ring, it kind of creates punches a hole in the ground, and it disappears. So Hanuman is asked to go and fetch his ring. He says, "Leke aap," because Hanuman is the only creature who can change his shape. He can become big, he can become small, all of that. So Hanuman becomes this tiny thing, and he slips down that hole, and he lands right in Patal Lok, or Vasuki's kingdom. Vasuki is the serpent king. So he goes into his kingdom and he sees Vasuki sitting at his table. There's a lot of food, celebration, sab kuch ho raha hai. And he tells Vasuki, I've come for Ram's ring. So Vasuki says, Acha, you want your Ram's ring? He says, Haan. So he calls his attendant and he says, Leke aao, bring that plate of rings. And he comes with this huge thali in which there are many rings. And he tells Hanuman, now you choose that ring which belongs to your Ram. And that's how the tellers of this story tell you that Ram is eternal. We want to bind him into one life. We want to bind him into one place and say he was born here, he died here, this is what happened to him. But actually, the idea of Ram is an eternal idea. That is the power of this story. So what Ramanujan and Paula Richmond, both of them have worked on it, and they say that, in India especially, we have this idea when we like a story or when we really, feel that this story talks to us, we want to adopt it. So we want to make it our own. So for example, if Ramayana, Valmiki ka Ramayana hai, which we all of us know that there is a Valmiki Ramayana. But now suppose that Valmiki Ramayana has to be told to somebody in Bengal, because it's set in the Valmiki Ramayana is largely based in the northern part of the country. But somebody in Bengal also wants to listen to that story and likes the story. They change things so that there is a Bengali-ness that comes into the story. So Krittibash, who did a version of the Ramayana, who, much later than Valmiki, what he does is Ram's marriage becomes a Bengali marriage. The food that they eat becomes Bengali food. So the places that he is describing is very culturally and geographically very Bengal. Then you have Kamban in the south, who also does the same thing. And both of them, however, are sticking to this, basic storyline of Ram, Sita, Ravan, etc. But there are some who completely dismantle that storyline. So the Jain, for example, the Jain Ramayana, they tell you that, look, Ram is eternal. And he is divine. And his story is a divine story because it has come to us from Mahavir himself. However, aap Valmiki pe mat jao. Because what Valmiki has done is actually he's distorted it. He is not giving you the real picture. Come to us, we'll give you the real picture. Now, all of them are doing it out of this deep adoration for the story. It's not that they want to disrespect the story or, that they don't, they want to show somebody else in a poor light. There's no insult involved in this kind of that has happened. So in that sense, Ramayana is what Ramanujan tells us is that, typically there are three kinds of translations that we have in, if you look at the world of translation. You have something which is called an iconic translation. So the West, for example, if you look at Homer's Iliad and the Odyssey, when you translate them, you'll translate it word for word. So much so that you'll even stick to the meter. They'll say the hexameter, they will stick to that hexameter. That is called an iconic translation. Then you have something which is called the symbolic translation, in which everything is different. Jaise ki Jain ka translation. The Jain Ramayana is completely different from, the Ramayana, in the sense that even in the Jain Ramayana, Ram doesn't kill Ravan. So that basic thing that you know and expect in a story, even that changes. And then you have, which is something which is called the indexical translation, which is like, we have in Kittibash and Kamban, where they adapt the story into their own belief. So in India, the Ramayana therefore has a bit of all of these three. But we can do what we want with the text. Because once we take the text and we like the text, we retell it. And this idea of retelling is embedded in the story itself.
I suppose the message also drives the story. What message you're trying to give? Like if you're telling a child and, you may just tell it differently to get the message across there.
Absolutely. So, for example, in Chhattisgarh, there are the Ramnamis. Ramnamis are, they used to belong to, they were oppressed as a category in society, they were oppressed. And for them, life was hard. So they had a lot of trouble that they wanted to bring out. And they started reading the Ramcharitmanas. Now, the Manas has a lot of verses in it which are not really favorable to the non-high caste speaking people. So what did they do? They removed those verses and kept it aside. And what they did was instead put in place of those verses, they put Kabir ke dohe, they put Ramdas ke verses, and they read it. For them, it is still the Ramayana. But they take only that part of the Ramayana which talks of love, of compassion, and of justice. That's all they want. So there was a documentary done on the Ramnami some time ago where this person, I think it was a French director who had come, and he was asking this elderly gentleman, why did you take the Manas? Because the Manas doesn't seem to be the right Ramayana for you guys. So he said, which Ram are you talking about? Are you talking about Dashrath Putra Ram? Because my Ram is there forever and forever. My Ram is not one, doesn't have one father. He's not limited by a time. My Ram is eternal. So that feeling gives them that authority over the character. It gives them the authority over the story because it's coming from a place of love. It's not coming from a place of, let's see what's wrong with it, or there is something wrong with it and I want to change it. That way.
Yeah, you're right. Because, I was just started reading Forest of Enchantment. This is Chitra Devakaruni. And it's on Sita. And she says
Right.
that, I'm going to write about my Sita.
Hmm.
And, so I think it's that sense of belonging, right?
Yeah,
That's where it comes from, probably.
absolutely. I think so too.
Yeah.
I think there is,
Hmm.
you want to own the character, you want to own the story. And it's from that space that we have been looking at them.
And it's very interesting, there's a lot of things you've said, and I told you just, so that before talking to you, I went through AK Ramanujan's essay as well.
Yeah,
And I was just seeing what you said, that there are so many, the Hanuman looking for the ring and Vasuki,
yeah,
giving him a whole plate, that Ramayana it's not the first time, it's eternal.
right,
So
right.
in that itself, I think, I'm just looking for it. There's one Adhyatma Ramayana in the
Hmm.
16th century, I think. I
Hmm.
mean, you'll know more,
Huh.
obviously. So Ram is exiled. He doesn't want Sita to go with him into the forest. I'm just reading out. So
Yeah.
Sita argues with him. At first, she uses the usual arguments. She's his wife. She should share his sufferings. So anyway, it goes on. And
Hmm.
then she bursts out. Countless Ramayans have been composed before this. Do you know of
Yes,
one where Sita doesn't go with Ram to the forest? And
exactly,
that clinches the argument. Yeah.
exactly. So you see, it's embedded in the Ramayana. And this is one way they tell you, one way the tellers or the storytellers are telling us कि बहुत सारे रामायण हैं and they all exist simultaneously. Sometimes we may think that there are many tellings because there are many languages, but that's not the case. There are many tellings of the story in Sanskrit also. So the Ramayana that you just mentioned is a Sanskrit telling of the Ramayana. So the idea that there are many Ramayans is embedded in the Ramayana. Also, because the questioning of the characters of the Ramayana is embedded in the Ramayana. So you see Sita, for example, when she's talking to Ram, she's constantly questioning. And this is one place, even when they go into exile and he's moving out, he's giving up all his, princely attire, he's giving up his jewelry and all his, royal robes, and he's dressed like an ascetic. And they're going into the jungle. But he keeps his bow and arrow with him. And she says, why are you taking this with you? So he says, no, I have to protect my people. So she says, what people? You're not a king anymore. You've given up. You're an exile. So you are going as one of the people of the jungle. And you cannot protect somebody against, the sages wanted him to protect them against the people from in the jungle. And she says, what you'll be doing is an unjust act. You can't do that. And she has an argument with her. So Sita herself is not a timid, the docile character who many of us think that she is, or something that television has converted her into some extent, perhaps. But she does have a mind of her own. And in the retellings, the authors pick up on that part of Sita. They pick up this feistiness that exists in her. See, she will do certain things which are in keeping with the times. She will have to be faithful to her husband. Her chastity is an important part of her character because we are living in a different time. It's a different age. But that doesn't mean that she is, she doesn't speak. She has no voice. She has a voice. And I think I find her character quite fascinating because, every age you're able to give her your voice. because of the power she wields within that story and as a character, she can take your voice and amplify it in that sense.
Yeah, like I was curious, so I just did a Google search. I thought, let's see what it throws up. I just wrote Sita, and the questions that come up was Sita, this was Sita. So one of them was courage and purity. So, she's a symbol of courage and purity. So we focus on the purity part. Maybe we somewhere, we forget the courage part. Like you said, it's there if you read it. She's constantly questioning. She's, stands up for herself. She asks questions. Even though she's going along, it looks like she's submissive. She has no choice, but it's her decision, I guess,
Yeah, and see, there are many ways you can, kind of do your permutations and combinations. You can cut up the story in different ways. But at the end of the day, here is this girl, in the songs about Sita, lots of songs that are there, folk songs about Sita. There is this Bengali version called the Chandrabati Sita. Then there is the Adbhut Ramayana. There is a Sarala Das Ramayana, where you see Sita not just being courageous enough to question Ram, but she is also a warrior. So the Sarala Das's Ramayana, the Odia Ramayana that is, they say that after all of this had happened, after Ram had killed Ravan and everything, there was another Ravan who is even more dangerous than the Ravan that Ram had killed. If Ravan had 10 heads, this Ravan had some 1,000 heads. He had some 1,000 arms. And he was infallible, like nobody could do anything to him. Even Ram couldn't kill him. And it was Sita it was only because of Sita that Ravan was killed. And how did she do that? She goes to the battlefield and she uses all the tools in her arsenal, including her Shringaras and her, Bhayankaras, everything to defeat that Ravan. And in fact, there is a time when Ram is, kind of feeling good about himself, and he's talking to his courtiers saying that, I killed Ravan and I did this and I did that, as, many male, victorious men are prone to do. But she reminds him, she says, yeah, you did that, but what did I do? I killed a Ravan, which is even stronger than the one that you killed. So now all of this all of this also comes, I think, Anuradha, because we were part of what we call the oral written continuum. So our stories today are written down. They are, put down in stone. But not everything was written down. It was being told. And you can imagine that if someone's telling you a story, there'll be somebody from the audience talking to you, or you're talking to them, and you want to build in these elements which will build a kind of connection with the audience. So a lot of it has happened also because of that.
Yeah, even the Jain Ramayana, which you mentioned, there you said it's actually Lakshman who kills Ravan.
Yeah. It's unique. It's really unique because they say that Ram is the most holiest of men, and he had finished his cycle of rebirths, and this was his last birth. And after this, he is going to become one of the gods. Now, how can he therefore soil his birth with a killing? He can't do that. So, therefore, he is not the one who shoots the final arrow on Ravan.
Yeah.
Lakshman does that.
Yeah, because he can't kill.
Yeah, he can't kill.
Right. And for them, Ravan is a tragic figure because he's
absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. Ravan is a tragic figure, and they tell you that, Valmiki told you that he has 10 heads, but can it really happen? That's not how it is. And, they give you there's a lot of emphasis on rationality, because we must also remember that these are religions that are being formed at that time. And for them, this text will serve do the work of, say, also a religious text. It's not a holy book like we would think that the Bible is for us. It's not like that. But a religious text in this context it would bring people together. It would create
maybe a code of conduct, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. So a collective belief system this is what, it carries with it. So they therefore will bring in their social ideas, their social mores into the telling of the Ramayana.
Yeah. Could you also talk about, the Chandrabati Ramayana? I think that's a Bengali 16th century poet.
That's right.
Yeah.
Right. So Chandrabati is she's a fascinating character. She herself has a backstory, which is quite fascinating. So Chandrabati parents were bowls. Her father was a bowl singer. And she's a historical character, but there have been obviously embellishments that have happened to her story over the years, but she existed. So 16th century, 15th, 16th centuries, I think around that time. And she was in love with this boy in her village, and she was about to get married to him. But right at the end, at the very end, I think a day or two before the marriage was to happen, this boy deserts her for another girl. And she's heartbroken. She's so heartbroken that she runs away and hides herself in the temple and is ready to give up her own life. So her father counsels her and he tells her that don't do this. Why are you wasting your life over a man? You have your life in front of you. If you want to do something fruitful, take the story of Ram, and you tell it and make that your story. And so she starts telling the story of Ram. And because of who she is, that she's a woman, B, she's a woman who is in sorrow, she picks up Sita as the core central character of her story, not Ram. And she starts her story with Sita's birth, not with Ram's birth. We have in the main Ramayana how, Dashrath is not having children. So you have that, that Yagna takes place, and then Ram, Lakshman, and all of them are born. She doesn't even go there. She doesn't even talk about Ram's birth. She starts with Sita's birth. And her Sita's birth actually happens in Lanka. So there, the story is that Ravan is this, really, he's a good king, but he's become arrogant and cruel. And his cruelty has kind of tipped all scales. And he's so cruel that he has extracted the blood of the people who live in his kingdom. Now, in some cases, in Chandrabati says all the Brahmins in the kingdom, who were refusing to pay taxes to him or had a bad year of crop growing, he extracted their blood and he collected all that blood and in a vial, and he gave it to his wife, Mandodari. He tells Mandodari, this is poison. Keep it very carefully. When I need it, I will take it from you. So Mandodari has kept it safely in her home, wherever it is. But she discovers that Ravan is being extremely unfaithful to her, to the extent that he doesn't even think about her. Her friends come and tell her that, he's been with so-and-so, Apsara, yahan pe hai. He's gone to the so-and-so other queen's house. And so she, kind of gets more and more desperate. And she says, there's no value to my life left anymore, so I'm going to kill myself. And she remembers that she has this vial of poison with her. And she drinks it up. But what happens instead of, ending up dead is that she ends up pregnant. And when she, she spends, and she's completely knackered, she can't lift herself up from anything. She's like on the floor. She's in that state. And about after 9 months or whatever the time is, and she finally, when she's able to get up, she lays an egg. And from that egg comes out, so she lays an egg, sorry. There's nothing else that has come out of the egg. But now everybody knows that the egg will have a life in it. So Ravan is told, and the astrologers are called, and everybody predicts a dire, future, saying that the seed for your ruin lies inside that egg. So the first thing is that let's crash it, and kill the egg. But she's a mother, at the end of the day, Mandodari is a mother, and she says that please don't do that. Let us send the egg away from her. And so the egg is wrapped up in beautiful cloth and, put into a small casket and set sail in the, into the sea. And because this is Chandrabati, she imagines it's the Bay of Bengal and it's set into the ocean. And it kind of rocks itself and finds its way to this, coastal place where there's a fisherman, an extremely poor fisherman who catches this egg. And he is, entranced with the sight of the, all the golden egg, trappings around the egg, etc. And he takes it home. And they are childless. And he and his wife then keep the egg in a very nice, kind of literally place it like on a pedestal. And they look after the egg. And ever since the egg comes into their house, their prosperity also grows. So people start talking about it. They get to know about it. But the fisherman and his wife are doing quite well for themselves. After a couple of, I think, some time, the wife has a dream. And in her dream, she's told that this egg actually belongs to the queen of the kingdom. And she has to take it to her. So then Sata, who's the fisherman's wife, is called Sata. She takes the egg and goes to the goes to the palace, which is Janak's palace. And then she goes, and she doesn't go to Janak. She goes to his wife. She says, I want to meet your wife. And she hands her the egg and says that here is this is a gift from me. The gods have said it belongs to you. And so the queen is very happy, and because they also are childless. And she says that whatever you want, I'll give you. And she says, I don't want anything, but I have only one request, that the child that is born from this egg, her name should be Sita, because my name is Sata. My daughter will be called Sita. Now, right through this whole telling, there are many other things that she does. That you see this, what we would today in our modern language call a feminist telling of the story. The girl is the hero. See, whenever there is a hero in a story, the hero's birth is always something that is extraordinary. It's a supernatural birth.
Yeah, today we call it the origin story.
Absolutely, absolutely. So Sita ka origin story deti hai. She doesn't give the origin story. Then every step of the way, the main deciding character is a woman, is a fisherman's wife who takes the call, what to do with it. Janak doesn't get it. Janak's wife gets it. So being a woman, she wanted to, obviously she was making a statement. Now, we may say, oh, it was just another retelling, but because there is so many things that she is deliberately inserting into the story, you can see that there is an idea of womanhood that she is putting into her telling of the story. So, and Chandrabati's version, many believe that it emerged out of folk tellings. So, there are lots of stories in oral telling in, say, Bengal, Nepal, and actually many of the Southeast Asian countries where the Ramayana is also told, they take the same theory of Sita being born in Lanka. And some of them will tell you she's Ravan's daughter, but some will not tell you directly that she's Ravan's daughter, but she was born to Mandodari. And that she was then made her way into the rest of the story.
I did a fascinating one, where she's mentioned as Ravan's daughter, and where Ravan and Mandodari, they pray for a child and then they're given a mango. And he says, he says that I'll eat the pulp and I'll give her the pulp and I'll eat the seed, but he does the reverse and he gets pregnant. It is so interesting.
It's a Telugu, I think it's a Telugu one, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah. And there is another one which says that Sita was born out of Ravan's sneeze. Ravan's sneeze is so loudly.
And that's Sita.
Yeah,
that's Sita, apparently.
Yeah. So it's the idea that here, there is in many of our old stories, you will see that one idea that the end to an arrogant king is always born in his own house. It could be a grandson, it could be a son, or it could be a nephew, or it could be, like we see in this case, a daughter. So that is an idea. That idea can manifest itself in many ways. So when you wanted to tell the story and bring that idea into it, you found this to be a good way to do that.
Yeah, there's just so much, but tell me, how do you see Sita?
So, Sita, initially, before I was studying myths and folklore, I never really paid much attention to Sita. Because, Draupadi is a far more glamorous character in this epic world. She is feisty, she, questions all the time. So, I didn't really kind of pay that much attention to her. But then as I started studying and I started looking at, the folk version or the other version. See, a folk version can only exist when there is some grain or some kernel that they take from the main version. It's not created in a vacuum. So that has to exist in the main character. So if they are getting Sita to question something, it exists in the main character. They can exaggerate it and create something else. So I was drawn to her malleability. So, unlike, say, the other characters, women kind of just adopted Sita and used her to tell what their problems are. So, Nabaneeta Devsen has done a lot of work on her, and she had a lovely term. She said, Sita represents for us when women sing of Sita, we are all sisters in sorrow. So, so the songs about Sita, for example, are about child marriage, are about marital rape, are about, her inability to, live or have a good meal. Even though she's a king's daughter, she's living in the jungle, she doesn't have a good meal, how she's ill-treated by her, various people in her life. And of course, how she is banished by her husband. How, despite being faithful, despite being a good person and a good wife, Ram, as a great king or as the Maryada Purushottam, is unable to see the worth of his wife. Now, these are real problems for many women. And they found in Sita a place in which they could keep those problems and talk about it without fear. And I think that really kind of got me interested in Sita, because I find that to be such a powerful characteristic. Because, no matter where I am and who I am, I can take Sita and use her to amplify my message. She gives us, and in that sense, she is like a strong woman, because she can then say, she can speak her mind, and she helps me speak my mind. So I feel Sita will speak to us the way we want to speak to us. She's not like a Draupadi. Draupadi will always speak to us in one way. And that is that, how a woman can't stand for any kind of wrongs. And she must speak up. But that's a different kind of a woman. Sita can speak for both, for that woman who's oppressed and the woman who is fighting her own battle. Both draw, they find something or the other to hold on to in Sita.
Yeah, I mean, even the woman who's silently suffering, and
Yeah.
I mean, Sita is somebody who's also faced sorrow and struggle, so
Yeah.
you get that. And plus, if you're trying to be strong, then you can take solace there as well.
Yeah.
She is
And
about courage.
correct. And so there is this whole, group of songs which are called millet, I think millet songs, grinding songs. Sorry, not millet songs, grinding songs. So women, while they sing of Sita while they're grinding flour, they're grinding millet, or, doing their regular chores. And they are known as grinding songs, where they will sing of, how much suffering Sita had to go through, and how much of troubles she had to go through just to live her life. And how in the end, finally, she does something that, no man can do. She says that I'll give my life up. I'm not going back to you. I think a stronger statement than that is not made. I mean, Draupadi doesn't, or any of the other characters that we know who we believe are strong. At the end of the day, they go with their husbands. Sita says, no, I have had enough. I'm going away. I don't want to go back to your kingdom. And she
That's
takes her
true,
own life.
because she's almost, I mean, she's a single mother in the forest.
She's a single mother in the forest, absolutely. She brings up her children, and then when she's told that, no, you come back now, and you take your place back in the kingdom, she says, no, I've had enough. So I think those are the points that the other versions take a kind of leap from. So they look at these aspects, because these are aspects that are embedded in the character of Sita. They're not making it up. They can give her other roles to do. They can make her do things that she's not done, maybe in a Valmiki or a Tulsidas Ramayana. But the the seed of courage that is there in her, it's very difficult to keep it down. So even a Tulsidas, for example, whose Manas is the most popular telling of the Ramayana, and he is a devotee of Ram, so he tells it from that perspective completely. For him, Ram is Bhagwan, and so he therefore will only speak of all the good he does, so much so that he doesn't even talk of the banishment of Sita. So he doesn't bring that up. But even he cannot give up those bits where Sita is actually asking Ram, questioning. So it's difficult to get rid of those pieces of Sita, those parts of Sita.
Yeah, and you mentioned Bhayankar Ras, so I'm just looking at Sita, who takes the form of Kali in the Adbhut Ramayana, which is also by
Yes,
Valmiki.
yes,
Yeah.
yes, absolutely. And Kali again is an interesting aspect that we have of the goddess, because for us, most of our goddesses are whatever, even if they are fierce, they're always benign. Their face will be benign. They are wearing a lot of jewelry. So they are in many ways, what the male has designed to worship. They look at them like that. But Kali is different. Kali completely breaks the mold. And whenever a woman is in trouble, she becomes a Kali. So when Sita needs help, she becomes a Kali. When Durga on the battlefield needs help, she gets a Kali to emerge from her. So the idea that that strength lies in you, that there is a Shakti in you that you can summon, is what Kali tells.
Yeah, and you're talking about Tulsidas. Could you talk about the differences, in the Valmiki Ramayana and the Tulsidas one?
So one of the big differences is that there is no Lakshman Rekha in the Valmiki Ramayana. Lakshman Rekha comes in with the Tulsidas Ramayana. In the Valmiki Ramayana, Lakshman tells Sita, don't step out. I'm going, but don't go out of the house. But there is no line that he draws. It's only in Tulsidas that that line is drawn. Now, times were different. He was talking to a different, set of people. Their fears were different. So he spoke about it like that. Unfortunately for us, what's happened is we've taken that Lakshman Rekha as a binding, or as something that you keep her in. So now when we look at it, it's time for us to really understand why Tulsidas put that Lakshman Rekha. He did it because the times were uncertain. He wanted to convey a certain view about keeping your women safe, which was relevant to a certain place and a certain time. However, that is not what Sita was. That she was not to be bound, because you can't really kind of keep her down in that sense. So I feel that's one of the differences. The other is that he only talks of Ram, and which is true. It's Ramayana, so it's the story of Ram. But the thing is, Ram's character as a hero or as a god is actually dependent on Sita, because he's being told that we are being told he's maryada purushottam. One of the things that makes him maryada purushottam is that he is an ek patni vrata. He is the first in the line of heroes in India to be married to a one wife. His father also had three wives. Even in, if you look at even the Mahabharata, everybody has more than one wife. So in that sense, Ram was setting a model for society. And so his existence, or his, greatness, one of his greatness derives from Sita. The second greatness that we are often told is that, look, Ram listens to his subjects. He had a year out for his subjects, because even some subject told him that, you have, Sita can't live with you anymore, and he listened to them. There too, his greatness or his glory derives from his relationship with his wife, that he puts her second and he puts his subjects first. So the idea that everything, to say everything is an exaggeration, but even say the Ravan war, he goes there because Sita has been abducted. So it's a story where she is there in every step of the way. She cannot be secondary to the journey. Without the Sita, just as we say without Ram, there is no Ramayana. Without Sita, there can be no Ramayana. So when you try to bring her role down, you end up kind of, getting a little distorted picture. And I feel that today we should look at all of this, because nobody was doing it to insult anybody. But I think when whoever rewrote or whoever was retelling the stories, many of them understood the power of Sita, and therefore they used their retellings to be able to convey the story they want to tell. So Sita again becomes is typically, again, I think Ramanujan has done this. He says that there is this whole Sita Surpanakha paradigm, that we have, that every epic will have a good woman, pure woman, and who's a chaste woman, versus someone who doesn't fill in all those, doesn't tick all those boxes. So in the Valmiki, if you look at all the Ramayans, like from Valmiki, then you go to Tulsidas, and then you look at Kamban, you'll see how the character of Surpanakha herself is being changed, and Sita is being changed to exaggerate the extremes, between these two women. So I feel that the different retellings allow us to see how society's attitudes towards women was changing. So if we look at Tulsidas like that, then we look at, say, the Chandrabati like that, then in Telugu there is a Mulla, there is another poet. She also wrote a Ramayana. You look at how they were writing about her and how they were writing about Ramayana. It tells you and especially when you look at the character of Sita, she allows us to see how the men, especially the powerful, those in power, and most of them were men, viewed women and their role in society at that time. And that's, I think, one of the big things that we see in the Valmiki and Tulsidas, the change we see.
Right. And also what you said, that Ram as Maryada Purushottam, he was a one-woman man.
Right.
Which was an oddity for those times.
Yeah.
So also, it's a love story really, if you look at it. And
Yes.
Sita's role as a wife, as a mother, it cannot be separated from, which is why maybe we forget the other stuff. She's seen as
Yeah.
submissive because we see her as the wife.
Yeah.
But it's also a love story, and maybe it's a tragic love story, or how do you see
Yes.
the love story itself?
It's the tragedy. While the Ramayana is a tragedy. If the starting of the Ramayana, right at the beginning, it starts with these two birds. There are two croncher birds who are, it's a couple, and they are, in the middle of a extremely, they're making them, they're in a, they're in a close embrace, and they are, in close proximity with each other. And a hunter shoots at them, and he kills the male bird, and the female therefore lets out a lament. And Valmiki watches that, and his anger at that, he's also he's angry and saddened, and he lets out a cry. And in his cry, he lets out the first verse of the Ramayana, which is why we get the shloka, because it's come out of his shok. So out of Valmiki's shok, out of his feeling of helplessness and anger, comes out the first verse. The shlok is born. And so, in that sense, the Ramayana is a tragic love story. It's embedded in the way Valmiki also starts telling us the story. So there is, and this idea that there is a tragedy going to unfold very soon, we see it in many of the folk versions also. So one of the, I don't know if it's a Padma Purana, I think one of the Puranic stories that tells us that Sita, when she was still a young girl and in Janak's kingdom, she took fancy to a parrot couple, and she kept them caged, and she didn't want to let them go. But the parrot couple didn't want to be caged; they wanted to fly free. So they begged and pleaded and begged and pleaded, but Sita was so attached to them that she didn't want to let them go. Finally, with great difficulty, she released one. I think she released the male parrot and kept the female, or the other way around. And but the two were inseparable. These birds were inseparable. As soon as one left, the other died. So that's a curse. So because she didn't let the love between these two birds to flourish, her love also would not flourish. So now see, these are ways in which we try and explain why such a thing has happened. Like, if I'm telling the story of Ram and Sita, somewhere or the other, somebody will say, but why did this have to happen? They were so much in love with each other. Why did the two not ever get any time together? They really don't get much time together at all. And there, then you start, this is what we call the cause and effect thing that starts. So you start finding backstory. There are many backstories like that, as to why Sita and Ram couldn't have spent all their life together. They had to live this tragic life of separation on earth, so that they can be together in heaven, happy. So it is, in many ways, it is a tragic love story, which we seem to forget, because we've lost the essence of the story in many ways. We kind of have focused so much on him being a good king or the victory over Ravan. I think to some extent we've kind of lost the breadth of the story. It's a much wider arc that the story travels.
Yeah, that's true, because we've just reduced it to just good and evil, a fight between good and evil, which it
Yeah.
is,
Yeah, which
and
it is. But
that's it. But there are a lot of small incidents,
true,
lots of messages in every
true.
character, and really, it's a tragic love story if you look at it. Makes you sad thinking about it.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah. It happens also because, to some extent, when you transfer a story which was told orally to text and then to screen, which is what is how we are getting the story today, you will lose some of the nuance. You are not able to bring out that nuance. And unfortunately for us, the folk arts, where the nuance does come out, be it in puppet shows or in, your dances or songs, those are not as popular anymore. They are popular within certain places and communities, but they don't have the same mass reach that other media has.
Just, looking at, the Thai Ramayana also, it's called the
Yeah.
Ram Kirti, right? That
Hmm.
also has a different version, I think.
The Thai and the Malaysian, each of them have many versions actually. So there are more than one in Malay. There are more than one versions in Malay, and there are more than one versions in Thai. They all now what is interesting is that in the Thai and the Malay versions, the emphasis is much more on Ram and Ravan, much more than the love story that we have. So they take that aspect, they take the war aspect of the epic and deal with it in a much more solid manner. But it's interesting because especially the Malay Ramayana, what's happening is it's being told at a time when Islam and Buddhism are both present at that in that area. And here is something that is, so how that text marries these different religions and yet doesn't offend anybody. And the whole when they're telling the story, especially the Hikayat Seri Ram, which is the one of the Malaysian versions, it's a hikayat is like a prayer. So the person who's telling the king the story, at the end of each verse, he keeps telling him that the idea behind everything is to be a good human being. And if I'm telling you something that you don't like, don't get angry with me, because my whole effort is to make you a good human being. So to be a good person is that aspect of the Ramayana is what many of these Southeast Asian versions do. And they are all fascinated with the character of Hanuman the most, So Hanuman takes on a very different form and role in those tellings. Now, why that happens, there are a lot of people who worked on it, saying that, the sociological and the environmental features of that space are what leads them into focusing on these aspects much more than anything.
So, okay, I just forgot. I was just listening so hard. Yeah, and it's so relevant even today. You're telling me those stories, I'm just listening, and I mean, one could just listen to the stories forever.
Yeah.
Really, even Ram Leela, I mean, it's still going on today,
Yeah, exactly. And it still has appeal. In Banaras, they still have a Ram Leela that goes on for some 12, 15 days. They still do that. There's one of the oldest Ram Leelas that you have. And the thing is that there are some in some of these folk tales about Sita, or in any of these folk versions, they don't need to tell you the full story. So they'll take one aspect, like when Sita was in the jungle, how would she have cooked her meals? That's a problem, because that's a problem that you and I would face. So they then will create a story around how she had a problem finding enough fuel to light up the fire, and how Ram got that for her. And that becomes a part of their Ramayana story. So not always do they have the full Ramayana that they tell you. So for example, in Orissa, I think there is this tribe long ago. This is a story that was collected by Verrier Elwin, where the women never wore blouses. And they had a story which said that, when Sita came into the jungle with Ram and Lakshman, the women laughed at her because she was not clad properly. And because they laughed at her, she cursed them, saying, "You all will never wear clothes properly." So, it's like this. That's how they have treated these characters. It's like part of that family. So you use them and you talk about them like that, like, in your daily this thing. In MP, I think there is another story. I can't remember it now, but basically on how this particular tree under which Sita was cooking her food had saved the fire from terrible thunderstorm, and therefore the tree is still worshipped. So Sita was sitting here, Ram sat here, Sita slept under this tree, Sita drank water from this well. These are the things that you'll find right all through the country, simply because everywhere you go, they want to adopt the story. And it's not as if only that the story is being adopted, the story itself also has adopted many folk motifs. So it's like what they call, both the classical and the folk have mixed up together. That's it.
Yeah, it's almost like saying that a village elder did this, somebody in the community did this, or a great grandmother did this, talking about a tree and, having stories like that.
Yeah.
It's your own.
It's your own. It's your own. So even the Ramnamis, for example, like I was saying, they say that, one of the elders had a terrible stomach upset, and he was in so much of pain that he couldn't sleep. And then in his dream, he got this thing that you have to chant the name of Ram, because only Ram can save. And therefore, he started chanting Ram. So, they are people like you and me. They are not your, large gods who are far away from you. They are divine, they are great, they are supernatural, but they are people like you and me at the end of the day. So they bear our burden.
Yeah, because if they were that far removed, you wouldn't feel like they can help you. You know, that
Yes,
relatability is there. Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah. So Arundhati, this is just so fascinating. Huh? So I want to ask one final question, but before that, you want to say anything else?
I also had made many notes before I got done to, because I thought I'll forget everything. No, I think you've asked me more or less. This ideal wife thing is what I was
Yeah.
thinking. We've kind of focused on that, I feel, to the extent that
Yeah,
we've
so actually that's related to the last
eliminated.
question also, so I'll just ask
Ha,
it anyway.
ha,
It's
ha.
the male gaze that we,
Yeah,
talk about.
yeah,
So
yeah.
yeah, that's
So
it. Yeah.
that, I think that's exactly what's happened, is because we've, much of the telling has always happened through men. Yes, Valmiki and all of them did write it, but even later, now especially, because of the way we've looked at Sita, is always looked at her through the angle of being a wife. And, a wife and a mother. These are the two things that we have looked at. However, if once we do that, you automatically then compartmentalize everything into being an ideal woman. That this is how you should be. And especially when we try and contrast her character with that of, say, a Surpanakha, and to some extent also with Keikei. But when we look at the folk, which is where most of the women are doing the storytelling, you will see that these barriers are broken. So not only do they kind of have stories where Sita is not always doing the right thing. Sita sometimes makes quite a lot of mistakes. There are stories which I think the Bhil Ramayana, where Sita is the most powerful character. She is the one who's directing what her husband should do. How he should set up a tent in the forest, how he needs to go and get food, how he needs to get her the fuel that she needs. She's in, I think it's in the Bhil or the Gond Ramayana, where they talk about how Sita and this is always a dynamic between Sita and Lakshman. So there are stories where Sita is, Lakshman and Sita. There are lots of stories that talk about there's a possibility of a relationship. They never fully tell you that there is a relationship or not, but they hint at that person. But it's not as if they are, it's not to kind of demean them in any which way. It's just simply because those relationships are par for the course in many of the tribes that spoke about them. So they also adopted her into their own milieu, and they talked about her like that. So I feel that if you look at Sita in all her, different characteristics, and we allow us to look at her like that, I think both sides, not just look at her as a feminist, through a feminist retelling, and not through the male gaze, we'll find a really real strong character that we've got in the epic, in that sense.
Yeah, that's wonderful, because from what you're saying, it's through folklore, folk tales, all the women have kind of reclaimed Sita,
Yeah,
right? I mean, we may use modern words like feminism and all that, but actually it's
yeah,
these women who have reclaimed and, presented her the strong version of Sita, really. Yeah.
yeah. They've understood her. So, you've got, for example, there are these songs, there's this one song, which is I think in UP, so Kaushalya is sitting on her throne and she sees Ram entering the door. And she says, I see you come, Ram. I see your brother Lakshman, but I don't see your wife Sita anywhere. Where is she? So she asks him a lot. She goes on a lot for a while. And then Ram says, Mother, Sita doesn't lack beauty, nor is she of low birth. I have left her behind and come alone. Her father didn't give enough dowry for my marriage. Then the queen tells him, gold lasts for 10 days only, son. Silver even less. Silk rips. But son, a good wife fills your life with happiness. So, this is a problem. Dowry is a problem. You know that it's a problem that's prevalent in a certain part of the country, much more than it is in other parts of the country, perhaps. So there is a song where Kaushalya, Ram, Sita are used to, kind of give voice to that problem. And so, it just depends on how you want to use Sita, because Sita can give voice to the problem that you face.
Which telling is this?
This is a small folk song from UP. So it just, there are then other songs, similar songs everywhere where Sita, in Mithila, for example. Sita is the daughter of Mithila, right? She comes from there. So the wedding songs, it's called as Gali Geet. Now, Gali Geet, they are abusing the, family of Ram, because the Sas, Sasur are being, taunted, made fun of, all of that, because wo Jamai wale hain. So they will make fun of them. And that's their Riti. So they will do that. And there are people who still sing those Gali Geet. Even in Bombay, we know a lady who does that. And things like that. So this shows you that how deeply embedded the story is in the culture. Now, to take that story and say it only belongs to only one kind of person, or only one kind of story exists, I think we lose the story in that sense.
Yeah, absolutely. Like Durga is the daughter when she comes home in Bengal, no? So
Yeah, absolutely.
So she's the daughter, they can do anything, portray her anyway.
Yeah, true.
You have
And
these
that gives
pictures.
you that proximity with the goddess. Na? You know that she is your own. And that's
Yeah, like I remember these pictures had come of Durga in the beauty parlor, Durga doing all this, and some people were aghast. But she said, no, she's our daughter. She has come home.
Yeah.
It's so beautiful. Like even
Yeah.
today, after so long, we're still so attached, to these
Yeah.
characters, really.
Yeah.
Gods,
Really.
goddesses, whatever, it's what they stand for.
Yeah.
Yeah. Arundhati, are there any books that you can recommend that people, who want to dig
Yeah.
deeper, they can
So,
read?
yeah, I think they should. I mean, what would be great is everybody reads Ramanujan's essay, which is on the 300 Ramayana, which I think is available freely online. One can read that. Then this book is an interesting book, which is called In Search of Sita.
I can see
So
it, yeah.
it has different people writing about it. And then this one, the Chandrabati Ramayana, the best one to read if one wants to read Chandrabati Ramayana is the one by Nabaneeta Devsen. She's done the translation of her story. And then this Paula Richmond book called Questioning Ramayana, because that gives you a whole lot of different aspects of Ramayana in different parts of the country. And it's an academic book, so even if it's an academic book, it's very research oriented. So they have collected the songs, they have collected the versions. There are, for example, in this book, there is one bit which tells you about how the whole caste, the idea of caste itself is being subverted using the stories. So they're interesting, and at least give you a little, wider view of what the story has really meant to people.
Thank you, Arundhati. I completely enjoyed this. Really.
Thanks a lot. I did too, Anuradha. Good to know. Good to be here with you.
Yeah.